thought maybe we could start by introducing ourselves since we're a relatively small number. I'm Laura Gillies, and I'm the current chair of the Library Board. And we have with us Dr. Sabrina Saunders, our CEO, and Joanne Vivona, who's a current member of our Library Board. But perhaps the rest of you could just give us your names.
Well, hi, I'm Pat Wright. I know Joanna from a number of boards and past experience. She sent me a note and asked me to come.
Great, welcome.
Hi, Chris Wickman.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Jen McNeely, and I come to this library regularly and moved to the area 2 years ago. And I was just interested to know more information.
Wonderful. Great. Welcome. Welcome.
Hi,
Sorry, go ahead.
Julia Scott, and I've been in Thornbury since 2012, and I love this library.
Great.
My name is Marie Swift. I'm fairly new to the area. I lived in the town of Blue Mountains for a year, previous year, and have been right close by for a year. Love libraries as well, and just interested in helping them.
Another Joanne DeVisser. I moved here just over a year ago, and library lover. And yes, I'm looking for ways to get more involved in the community, and specifically around community activities. I love everything the library's been doing, and it's really impressed with the plan.
Oh, great. Good.
Just by a show of hands, East End? This end? Like
As in the
Craigleith area?
Oh.
Over this end? Okay. And rural? Okay, just trying to see
Sort of, rural.
where people are from. All right.
Okay, great. Thank you. You want to get another slide for me?
Mm-hmm.
So this is tonight's agenda. What are the obligations of members of the board? What to expect in our 22-26 term? Overview of the recruitment information page so you can get at more information, how to apply, and what the appointment process will be. And that Q&A can actually be through all of them, so feel free to stop me and ask questions as we go. So we are a GLAM, a Gallery, Library, Archives, and Museum. You're sitting in the gallery right now. We have two locations. Here, the Ellie Shore building and the Craigleith Heritage Depot. This is predominantly our library service and gallery, and the Heritage Depot is predominantly the museum, though we do some library service out of that, but not too much. But we are, because we're a GLAM, we're really quite a cultural umbrella for the town and a community hub. So that's, I think, an important aspect, because it's not that often that you see all 3-4 types of services under one umbrella in a community. Yeah, so next slide, I think, please. So the complement of the board, it is a 7-member board, and it's all of us who are appointed by council. 6 members are community members, and 1 member is a councillor. And the board sits for a 4-year term concurrent with council. So new council takes over
November 21st, I believe.
Thank you. And they'll be making appointments probably late November, early December. So the new board would take over at that time and then stay in place until a new board is appointed. Next, please. So the eligibility to sit on the board, you have to be at least 18 years old, Canadian citizen. You all qualify for that? Okay. A Canadian citizen or permanent resident, a resident of the town of the Blue Mountains, and you cannot be employed by the board or by the municipality.
And those are the legislated aspects, so we have no say in those, nor does the town.
Mm-hmm. So I want to say that the board is very much a governance board. It's a corporation under the Public Libraries Act, and we are responsible for various pieces of legislation like the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, Accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Act, and Municipal Conflict of Interest. So those are acts that you'll hear more about in an orientation session and have to have some familiarity with. So board members have a fiduciary responsibility to represent the best interests of the library board at all times. And this is a general role of most governance boards. We have legal responsibility. We appoint the CEO, secretary, treasurer. We direct the CEO via policies and plans, and we evaluate her performance on an annual basis. We develop policies to govern the organization. We ensure the board's assets are managed responsibly. We work with the CEO to prepare and approve an annual budget based on the council's allocation. We ensure the community is aware of the importance of BMPL, so we have a good advocacy role on behalf of the library. We set long and short-term goals, publish a strategic plan every 4 years, and there is a, oops, I got microphones here. You have this sitting in your package. This is the executive summary of our strategic plan for this 22-26 period. And we also monitor board effectiveness in achieving its goals over the 4 years. So that's pretty standard governance board responsibilities. The board meets, legislatively it's required to meet at least 7 times during the year. We typically meet 10 times, basically once a month, with the exclusion of August and December. It's on the 3rd Thursday of the month and usually runs about 2.5 hours. It can be the afternoon or evening, so it will be decided by the new board when they actually want to, what hours they want to meet. So if your people are working full-time and they can't meet at 2 in the afternoon, which is our typical time for the current board, then you could say, well, we want to meet at 5 or 6. So it would be the new board's decision, but it'd still be a 3rd Thursday of the month. And there's occasionally additional special meetings as needed, not very often. There's also some committee work. We usually have standing committees that are focused on the goals of the strat plan, and there's 2 main goals of the plan that relate to the governance issues, and one is the community hubs, the other is organizational excellence. The third pillar of our strat plan is empowering services, which is predominantly operational and so more under the purview of the CEO than the board. Each board member will be asked to sit on a committee, and the committees themselves set their own meeting dates and times depending on what work that they're tackling. So there is a really easy to read summary of the strat plan, but as I said, you have an easier to read version right here. One of our roles is to oversee the implementation of that plan. That's a fairly important one. So not only does the board get involved in developing the plan, but then we oversee its implementation. And it's a 4-year plan that is also concurrent with the board. And so the last board just did a 14-month study with quite a deep community consultation to develop this plan. And then it'll be a job of the next board to do a new plan in 4 years. But in the meantime, our role is to implement this. So you can see we have the vision, mission, values, and we identified 3 pillars: the community hubs, empowering services, and organizational excellence. And for each of those, we identified the goals that we would want to achieve within those areas. Okay. We created for you see if I can find my copy, a legacy document, which kind of looks like this, but it will look different on our website and includes a lot of information that the board pulled together, the current board pulled together to help you hit the ground running with some good advice and context from the outgoing board. So the legacy document includes a number of things. It includes the key documents that are listed here. It includes a list of our key advocacy efforts over the recent board term and an environmental scan. This is all available on our website under Library Board and Candidate Information. So you can get at all of these and take a little bit closer look later. So the strat plan is there. We also create annual action plans. So they look kind of like this. And so what they do is they take our 4-year plan and they take a look at what are we going to do this year. And so it's a document that the board looks at, develops itself with the help of the CEO. And we organize it under the pillars and the goals of the strat plan, and then we identify outcomes for the individual year, what the lead party is, and the expected timing. So we really are fairly disciplined in terms of keeping an eye on the strat plan and working our way to implement over the term of the board. So that's the first two. We have a memorandum of understanding with the town. It outlines the roles and responsibilities of each party. The town provides a number of services to the library board, including finance, human resources, IT, and facility use and maintenance. So that's a fairly comprehensive agreement that we negotiated, I think coming up on 4 years. We also have a more recent funding agreement with the town, and this is where the town provides us with 6% of the previous year's tax levy to fund BMPL's budget. So that was something they introduced. I guess this is coming into our second year with that process, and it rolls over. It's a 3-year agreement, but it rolls over automatically. We also have building conditions report, and that outlines the maintenance and repair needs for both the LES, this facility, and the Craigleith Depot, so you have a good sense of where we are in terms of maintenance needs. The facilities are owned by the town, but we work with them in terms of what are the needs for maintaining the building. We also have something called the gap analysis, and I have that here. Looks like this. And this is something that Sabrina did a wonderful job writing a couple of years ago, and it has since updated it. And what it really does is it talks about the buildings in terms of not the maintenance and repair issues, but in terms of what does a building need in order to really be a 21st century library. So for example, this room's a good example because just recently we introduced the technology to be able to record this meeting so that it can then be put on Facebook and broadcast. So bringing up the library in terms of technology is one example. So the gap analysis really talks about the various things the library can do and how the building, it affects the needs of the building. And of course we have our annual reports, year in review. We started doing those by video so that you can get at those and take a look at those when you like. The other area I wanted is the key advocacy efforts. We did some work with the current board on a key supporter initiative, we called it, where we took a look at our relationships with various groups in town and looked at whether, who are our supporters, who are kind of on the fence, and who presents challenges to us, and how might we work with those groups and make sure they understand what the library is about and our services, and that we can turn them into solid supporters of the library. So we have some more work we want to be doing on that going forward. Another area for us will be the East End Hub. I mentioned that there is some library service offered out of the museum, but it's fairly minimal. And Craigleith, that end, the East End, is our largest growing area of the town. And so there's quite a bit of pressure for library service at that end of the town. And the outgoing council has discussed creating a community hub at that end, which would include library service. And so that's something that this new board will be dealing with throughout its term as the new council grapples with how they're going to address services at the East End. We also, there's still some work to do on the Craigleith Heritage Depot because it will remain as a museum regardless of what happens with the East End Hub, and there's still some ongoing work in terms of renovations of that facility. And finally, there's some retrofit that needs to be done here. So those are sort of the areas where we see some advocacy work for the new board term. This is a snapshot of the page on the website that has all of this information. So this is where you go to the library board governance and look for the candidate information. And so here you see the various things I've just talked about, the key documents for review, the key advocacy efforts. The environmental scan, the board also had good conversations around strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and that's all compiled there in environmental scan, so you have a good sense of where the outgoing board sees real opportunities for a new board, and also things that we felt as a board we still needed to do some work on. And there's some other additional governance information, much of which I think is sitting in front of you on the chairs. And then, of course, there's the last audited financial statements are available on that page. Candidate experience and knowledge. So we're looking for board members who are familiar with or happy to be trained on governance rules, the board's bylaws, governance policies, our strat plan, and our budget. I don't think I have much more to say about that. So we will be providing training and orientation in a lot of these areas. So you just have to be willing to learn if you're not already familiar with some of those items. Next, please. How to apply. So the actual process of application is under the control of the town, and they have already issued their call for applicants. So you must apply to the town clerk by November 23rd at 1 p.m. I've already applied, and she almost immediately acknowledges receipt of that.
If you don't get an acknowledgement of receipt within 24 hours, not a bad idea to follow up. They're immediate. I mean, unless they're in council all day and she doesn't have a chance to do it, it would never be more than a day. So don't let it get past the 21st or 23rd and think, did she get it, did she not get it? You will get a receipt back that it was received. So just in case, you never know what happens with internet from time to time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then the clerk will deliver the applications to a library board recruiting committee. We have two outgoing members of the board who are not applying, who will participate on a recruitment committee, and the intent is that the eligible applicants would be interviewed on November 26th or 27th. That may depend on the number of people we have applying, but that's, we sort of set aside those 2 days. And then a recommendation will be presented to council on November 28th, and it'll be their decision who they appoint to the board. Should tell you that people do have to have a police criminal records check because we are operating within the vulnerable sector. So that's something you get from the police. Is that something that's charged for?
No, as a board member you won't be. And then the clerk's office will tell you what other types of background checks they're requiring this year. It kind of changes from council to council, but they'll provide all of that information once you're at that final stage of we'd like to move you forward and we need this final document.
There will be a mandatory orientation, and it's already booked for January 19th. That also would be an opportunity to just socialize and get to know each other. That's one thing we really felt with this last board is COVID really shut down the social opportunities and fellowship that one normally enjoys at a board. And that has been quite a frustration, I think, for everybody. So it became much more of a work opportunity, and lucky you. But that's something we hope that we'll be able to address this time around, is have a bit more fun and less, Zoom meetings. But the first full day would be orientation. There's also be some joint orientation with council. There's some things that we will be asked to participate in, like training for the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, maybe some information about the Integrity Commissioner. I'm not exactly sure all the ones, but anything that we can be done jointly with the town, then we will do it with the town. And then there'll be other orientation that's specific to the library. And it won't just only be in one day, because we've also heard that it can be a bit overwhelming if you're completely new to the sector. So it would be spread out over some monthly meetings as well. Meeting dates, as I mentioned, the third Thursday of the month has to be, according to the Public Libraries Act, at least 7 months worth of meetings. Typically, this board has had 10. We don't usually meet in August or December. Meetings are around 2.5 hours, and as I said, they'll be set They run sometime between 2 and 8 p.m., but right now the current board starts at 2, but it doesn't have to be that. The new board decides based on their own schedules what works best for them.
The important thing to know about the timing is we work with all of the towns' councils and county councils and committees. So that's why it has to be the third Thursday of the month, 2 o'clock or later. So there's no opportunity for it to be, if the board comes together and says, we want to have a regular meeting on the second Tuesday, because those are booked for other members of council meetings where people have cross appointments. So it will most definitely be that third Thursday. It's just you have some play with what the members want to do for the time for the start.
You get the meeting packages about a week in advance, so it gives you some time to prepare for the meetings. We have been conducting meetings over Zoom because of COVID. We hope to be able to continue in person, which we've just really started doing fairly recently again. But we're also equipped for hybrid meetings, so we can now do meetings where some people are actually physically in the room and some people are coming in from a distance. So it does open opportunities as well for people that can't physically get here on Thursdays, third Thursday of the month. Meetings are live streamed and they're also recorded so that people can access them later to see them on Facebook and on our webpage. And I think that covers everything I wanted to say. And no one asked a question as I rattled on. Here's your best opportunity. Yes?
Are all the meetings here at the library?
They have been, yeah.
Unless there's a joint meeting with council, then we're in council chambers.
Marie?
The interview dates that you have set, are those set in stone? Like what if somebody happens to be out of town or out of the country? Can it be a Zoom interview?
We could do a Zoom interview if needed. The dates are set because it closes on Wednesday. They give it to the committee on Thursday. We have to interview and get the report by 5 o'clock on Sunday, and council looks at it at 9 in the morning on Monday.
Okay.
So there's a very short window. However, if you can't make it, it just means we'd be informing council that we weren't able to do an interview, and they're still going to take whatever information is provided and make their own decisions. So it doesn't mean that you would be precluded from applying or being involved. Just like we have the information night tonight, we may have people who apply that aren't here. It's all just trying to help council to make informed decisions.
Sorry, you had a question, I know.
With the new council, just other than knowing that they have to focus on East End, which I'm learning new terms, and knowing that with our government's focus on development, et cetera, I'm just curious if there's anything that you know that's in the new plan, the new 4-year plan, that might have to be revisited, or are there areas that, I mean, just honestly, does the board or CEO have any concerns about that they're coming up that are just like, we might have to spend more time on this than we anticipated? I'm just curious.
My best response to that is, it is a new council. And the new council will look at all of the priorities that they choose to look at, which may not be the current priorities that have been identified. So as a board, there may be some pivoting to say, okay, we're changing the way we're looking at things. We're changing the term that we use for the same thing. Sometimes the word changes, but you realize they're still talking about the same places. There's a number of really big projects that are on the horizon for the town. We have the retirement village, nursing facility, all of these pieces that are happening just around the corner here. There will be a segment of library service that's in there, mostly in the more skilled nursing and for people that wouldn't easily be able to leave. So instead of having a homebound service that we bring to them, we're going to provide some areas right in there. It won't be big, it'll just be a corner, but it makes it easy, especially in a memory care situation, being able to just have a staff member grab an audiobook or grab something to provide to a person. We'll circulate those. So that may become more of a priority. It may be a real operational piece. It may be something that we see changes the way the town wants to look at it, and we have to go back and advocate for how this supports a segment of our community. We won't know until we really meet and see the new council in action, and we see where their interests and passions are, and how they take those early reports by the town staff and see where they're going to put their priorities. So it's a hard one to say what will happen.
Yeah, no, that's good, thank you.
Yeah.
So the whole board turns over every 4 years?
Yes.
But
The-
are
The-
you staying?
Nobody's staying.
Nobody's staying. I'm reapplying.
Okay. So that must be kind of interesting for you. Everybody changes.
Every 4 years, it's a new council and it's a new board.
Okay. So just following up on that, are all the positions are up, obviously, but are there some people on the current board who are wanting to stay like you? Just trying to get a sense of, like, are there
Yeah,
going to be 6 new people, or?
there will definitely be, 6 new people. Well, once I get on, there'll be 5 new people.
There's
But-
only one board member who has expressed a desire to come back. Not from a negative end, they've just done their time. Some have been on long-term for a while. Some have been recalled back to work when they thought that they were retired. All of these things kind of happen. But ultimately, council will make the decision on all 6 of the community members. So we know that we're going to have a significant portion of new members. And we only know that question because we had to ask to build the committee. You have to be outgoing and not wanting to return so that we know that we're not having somebody who wants to come back be the interview.
Yeah. I don't know.
So we know that from that purpose.
we also did exit interviews with all of the board members who said they weren't reapplying to see if there was, something we could learn from that. And we certainly, one of the things I really took away was, and I said this earlier, is how much fun was stolen from us because of suddenly just being a bunch of squares on a screen. So it really was just meetings. And our first year was much more interesting. Life generally was much more interesting, but we were able to do things like we worked with the creator space people, one of whom is back here at the moment, and looking at the sort of technology they were able to introduce to the community. And so we saw a lot of that being demonstrated. We had tours of the facilities, and then suddenly things like that we lost all at once. Well, and I know some of the new members went to the Ontario Library Association conference. They have a boot camp, they call it, in early February every year, where they bring trustees from around the province, and they talk about issues for libraries. And 2 of the new members really enjoyed that, the opportunity to meet other people that are entering the field for the first time. But again, that kind of got blown up. So that was a real factor for a lot of the people, is it just took away, they could make their contribution and do the work, but the thing that you come to these things for is not just the contribution. It's also the learning and the ability to interact with people and make new friends and have interesting conversations. And much of that was stolen from the current board. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead.
So the Ontario Library Association, will they be having a live conference again this coming February?
We are. I'm actually the president of the Ontario Library Association right now. So we are doing a dual conference. It's not hybrid because you can participate independently, but there isn't broadcasting of what's happening there. So the conference will be shortened so that we can basically run 2 concurrent conferences. And it will be on Thursday and Friday in Toronto, face-to-face. And then there'll be a digital component, and then the library board program, which happens on the Saturday. We're still doing it digital this year, just because many of the boards, not every council is as productive as our community is, and sometimes in February they haven't put somebody into place for a board, or it happened 3 days before, and then you just can't get a hotel in Toronto and travel, so by doing it digital in the first year, it makes it a little bit easier for participation. But they've already said they are planning on doing it face-to-face next year, because that networking experience is a huge part of the boot camp.
So then would there be budget for just a couple of members of the board to go and attend?
The digital program, we purchase an institutional member, so 100% of our board can attend. We try to make sure that there's lots of opportunities, whether it's our doing the training or things happening provincially that our board members can participate in. Joanne was our rep for the trustee council meetings. They happen one in the fall and one in the spring. They used to be face-to-face. They moved away from that and they went as a digital program. Again, because it's virtual, we had the same comments from people that it's not the same thing as, you know, we all pile into Owen Sound from the region, or we all went up to, you know, Perth one day, and I think we were in Midland another one, and all the trustees were together. But they do that twice a year, and one member of the board, as the committee function, will take that on, whether it's for a year or longer. They attend those and they basically report back. So there's lots of opportunities to participate in different ways, both locally and provincially.
So you made a comment about the budget is set at 6% of the tax revenue, so that's obviously good in a community that's growing. That means, I guess, that your revenue grows every year, but can you comment at all about the financial pressures? Is this something that the board is quite worried about?
This year, the board opted not to pass the budget because typically we pass our budget between October and November for the next year, and the board made the decision not to pass it and to leave it to the next board to make the decision, mostly because we're waiting for council to make a decision on what the wage increase is going to be. So we are part of the town's grid. We are separate and independent, but we have paired ourselves on them so that there's always a pay equity there between us and the town. We are not town employees, but we are arm's length to the town. We're not a department, but we work very closely because we're all using the same tax base to do a job. So we are on the town's salary grid. And currently, the municipality has a bylaw that says that they will use the September CPI, the cost of living index, to determine what the raises are going to be, which is about 9%.
Yes.
We don't believe it's going to be 9%. We believe that the next council is going to pass a resolution that sets a different number. But the result is, my budget has to show a 9% salary increase, and when the staff are looking at it, trying to see what their budgets will be for the departments within BMPL, I say, don't look at the top, because we know it's not happening. But the reality is, it's a significant shortfall of what the funds are that come to us.
The 9%?
If we had to do 9%, yes. We would be over by a significant amount. So the board made the decision not to pass a budget arbitrarily, that we'd have to change anyways. We'll wait for the new council to come in. One of the first things they're going to have to do in the budget process is make a decision on what that COLA is, cost of living allowance. That will be for the grid for salary, and last year it was 1.62%, and the CPI was 4.9%. So they made a decision not to follow the bylaw, passed a resolution to do that. So whatever that number is, then it'll come back to me to make those adjustments. If there's a problem, like 9%, I will come to the board and we're going to have conversations about what we do, which would either be a change in service model or going back to the town and saying we can't make this number. Obviously, the entire town is impacted by that number, so every department is also looking at that to see where it is. And nobody is looking for tax increases to make up those differences, but council will make what they think is fair enough for this. So that, I think, is the number one task that is going to be put to a board, is to know this is the budget that I'm presenting to you. This is you know, 90% of that budget is going to be salary, just about in every situation. That's always the same. And then we'll see if we are in a crunch because of where the cost of living increase is, or if it's what we projected. We planned for a 2%, knowing that we would be fine with 2%. Above 2% is a bit of a crunch, and we have to work it out. 4% would be tight. 9%, of course, is a deal breaker. But we're not assuming that that'll be there. But that'll be something that the board will be looking at in January, maybe February, if council is still running the budget and making that decision with the final budget. The previous council, this current council, this year made the decision early on in the budget process that they were going to set a number, and then all of the budgets were released to the public based on that number. So I would anticipate that the finance department of council will look for something very early on in probably December to start bringing those information to them, so that before the budget goes out to the public and there's a sticker shock of a number that nobody intends to use, that they can bring it into something a bit closer.
Thank you.
The East End, I think, is the other big one. So we are not actively pushing for the library in the East End. We are advocating for that, knowing it needs to happen, but it's a town joint facility. So we are at the table, we are talking about it, we are working with them to make sure that our needs are involved in there. We're looking to be an anchor in that building, but at the same point, it needs to be a town-driven initiative at this point. So with a new council, they may be right on that, thinking that's a priority, and then we would be at the table. They may feel it's not a priority, and then we would be advocating and explaining why we think that's a priority to look at, but ultimately it'll be a town initiative on moving that forward.
I just want to comment that the outgoing board has seen a good part of its role, a driving part of its role, as being a good partner to the town. And working closely with them, Sabrina does so at the staff level. I had regular meetings with the mayor. As individual board members, we got to know individual councillors over coffee, and so we had a comfortable working relationship. And I think, particularly with COVID, that demonstrated to council how valuable the library is in helping them, bridge the gap when there's such a dramatic shift in our world. And so that's something I think continues to be an important priority for the organization, is to be, a good partner with, basically our primary funder. More questions? Or just more thoughts? No? No. We will end the formal part of this then, but hang around if you want to come and have one-on-one discussions. We'll just take the mics off.
Thank you.
But thank you. Yeah, thanks for coming out and showing some interest in this.